When Maya Carter stepped into Westhaven Medical Center, she expected challenges, but not a battle for survival. A skilled, dedicated nurse, Maya was ready to prove herself in one of the city's most prestigious hospitals. But from the moment she arrived, she felt it. The cold stares, the whispered judgments, the unspoken rules that told her she didn't belong. At the heart of it all was Dr. Richard Langston, the hospital's senior physician, a man who made it his mission to break her down. But what he didn't know was that Maya was being watched. A patient no one paid attention to had seen everything, and he was about to change the game forever. What happens next will shake the entire hospital to its core. Maya Carter adjusted her crisp white coat as she stepped through the glass doors of Westhaven Medical Center. The hospital was prestigious, high-ranking, and notoriously difficult to get into, especially for someone like her. She had fought hard for this opportunity. Top of her class, years of experience, glowing recommendations. Yet, as soon as she walked into the nurse's station, she could feel it. The shift in energy, the unspoken tension. Conversations quieted, eyes flicked in her direction before quickly looking away. A few nurses exchanged looks, lips pressed together. Maya swallowed the knot forming in her throat. She had dealt with this before. It wasn't always outright hostility. Sometimes it was subtle exclusion, the cold silence, the assignments no one else wanted. But she wasn't here to make friends. She was here to prove herself. "Excuse me," she said, forcing a smile as she approached the nurse's station. "I'm Maya Carter, the new hire. Could you direct me to—" A blonde nurse barely glanced at her before tapping a clipboard against the desk. "Third floor. ICU. Dr. Langston is waiting for you." Maya nodded, gripping her bag a little tighter. Dr. Richard Langston. She had read about him. One of the most renowned physicians in the hospital. A senior doctor who carried weight around here. If she could impress him, maybe things would start to feel easier, or so she thought. When she arrived at the ICU, she spotted a tall man in his early 50s, silver hair neatly combed, his white coat pristine. He was reviewing a patient's chart, and when he finally turned to face her, his expression was ice cold. "You're the new nurse." Not a question, just a flat observation. Maya straightened. "Yes, Dr. Langston. Maya Carter. It's an honor to—" "I don't have time for introductions." He snapped the file shut and handed it to her. "Here, room 412. Patient needs a full exam. I'll check your work later." The dismissal was clear. No greeting, no welcome, no acknowledgement of her credentials. Just a test she was expected to fail. Maya quickly realized that her workload was different from the other nurses. While others handled routine checkups, she got the most complex cases. While others had moments to breathe, she was constantly running between rooms. And while mistakes were brushed off for her colleagues, hers were scrutinized. By the end of her shift, exhaustion had set in, but she refused to break. Then, in room 318, she met him. Henry Caldwell, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, lying in bed with a cast on his arm. He watched her closely as she adjusted his IV. "You're new," he said, his voice calm but curiously observant. Maya nodded. "First day." A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Rough start?" She hesitated. "I'm managing." Henry studied her for a long moment before nodding. "You'll need to be tougher than that." Maya frowned. "Excuse me?" But Henry just smiled, eyes sharp as if he knew something she didn't. And for the first time since she walked into Westhaven Medical Center, Maya had a feeling she was being watched for a very different reason. She had no idea who Henry Caldwell really was. And soon, neither would the rest of the hospital. Maya Carter knew hospitals were supposed to be places of healing. But here at Westhaven Medical Center, the air was thick with something else. Exclusion. The small side comments, the way nurses conveniently forgot to include her in discussions, the way Dr. Langston watched her, waiting for her to slip up. It was all adding up. This wasn't just about her job. It was about whether or not she was allowed to belong here. "Nurse Carter?" Dr. Langston's voice sliced through the room as he approached the nurse's station. Maya straightened. "Yes, doctor?" He handed her a stack of files, his expression unreadable. "I need you to prep room 209 for surgery. Full pre-op. Make sure you follow every protocol. No mistakes." The other nurses exchanged glances. Maya didn't miss it. The way one smirked, another shook her head. She bit the inside of her cheek and took the files. Understood. As she walked off, she heard the whispered voices behind her. Why would they give her such a critical task? "I heard Dr. Langston doesn't like her." "Well, that's obvious. He's just waiting for her to screw up." Maya heard every word. She felt the weight of their expectations, their assumptions that she wasn't good enough, but she wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. As the hours passed, Maya worked harder than ever. She triple-checked every form, every medication, every step of the pre-surgery preparation. She would not fail. By the time she returned to check on Henry Caldwell in room 318, she was exhausted but held herself together. Henry, however, was watching her again, not with judgment, but with something else. Understanding. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Maya exhaled through her nose, forcing a small smile. "I'm managing." Henry tapped a finger against his blanket, his sharp eyes never leaving her. "They want you to fail," he said bluntly. Maya's fingers froze on her clipboard. "Excuse me?" Henry's smile didn't fade, but his tone hardened. "I've been listening. The way they talk when they think no one is paying attention. The way Langston sets you up." Maya's stomach tightened. He had noticed. "I appreciate the concern, but I can handle myself." Henry tilted his head. "I don't doubt that, but you shouldn't have to." Maya stared at him for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. Before she could respond, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Nurse Carter, report to Doctor Langston immediately." Her heart sank. She knew what was coming next. But what she didn't know was that Henry Caldwell wasn't just any patient, and he wasn't going to stay silent much longer. Maya Carter had spent her entire career holding her head high, refusing to crack under pressure. But this was different. She stood in the crowded operating room, her hands clenched at her sides, her face burning as Dr. Langston's voice thundered through the room. "This is what happens when you put someone incompetent in a position they don't deserve." The room was dead silent. Maya could feel the stares. The surgical team, the nurses, the assistants, all of them, watching. She had done nothing wrong. And yet, Langston had found a way to blame her anyway. The emergency call had come in suddenly. A critical patient. The operating team rushed to prep. Maya had been placed on suction, a simple but crucial job, keeping the airway clear, ensuring the doctors had a clear view during the procedure. She followed every instruction exactly. Then, out of nowhere, Langston barked, "Carter! Suction! Now!" Confused, Maya had lifted the tube, only to find that another nurse had already taken over without her realizing. And in those 2 seconds of hesitation, Langston pounced. "Unbelievable. We needed suction seconds ago and you're just standing there? Do you even know what you're doing?" The energy in the room shifted. Maya's stomach twisted. She knew this wasn't about the procedure. It was about making a statement, about humiliating her. "Dr. Langston, No excuses," he snapped. "You could have cost this patient their life." The patient was fine, but the damage was done. After the procedure, Maya had barely stepped out of the operating room when she was met with an icy glare from the hospital administrator. "My office. Now." Maya followed, her legs heavy. Langston was already there, arms crossed, wearing that self-satisfied smirk. "I've been patient," he sighed dramatically. "But today was unacceptable. I don't want to hear it, Carter." He turned to the administrator. "I've warned you before. If we lower our standards, we put patients at risk. I suggest we make this her first and final warning." Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had worked harder than anyone, done everything right, and still, this. The administrator folded his hands, looking at Maya with disappointment she didn't deserve. "You're on probation, Nurse Carter. One more issue, and we'll have to re-evaluate your position here." Maya nodded stiffly. She refused to cry. She refused to let them see her break. Maya walked the hospital halls in a daze that night. She found an empty hallway, slid down against the cold wall, and let the exhaustion hit her all at once. A tear escaped before she could stop it. "Long day?" The voice was calm, knowing. Maya's head snapped up. Henry Caldwell, sitting in a wheelchair near his room, watching. She quickly wiped her face. "I'm fine." Henry didn't push. He just nodded, rolling himself back into his room without another word. Maya took a shaky breath. She just needed to get through one more day. The next morning, Maya arrived early, bracing herself for another impossible shift. She stopped by her locker, opened it, and froze. A small black business card was placed neatly inside. The paper was thick, expensive, and written in perfect bold letters. "We need to talk. Room 318. H. Caldwell." Maya's breath caught. Who exactly was Henry Caldwell? And what did he want from her? Maya Carter stared at the black business card. Her heart pounded. Room 318. She knew she shouldn't go. She should just mind her business. keep her head down, and survive another shift. But something about the way Henry Caldwell had watched her the night before, the quiet understanding in his eyes, made her decision for her. Taking a steady breath, Maya turned toward room 318 and stepped inside. Henry Caldwell sat upright in bed, dressed in a sleek navy robe instead of the standard hospital gown. The usual warm, patient-like demeanor was gone. In its place was something different, something calculated, powerful. "You came," Henry said, a small smile playing at his lips. Maya hesitated. "You left a card in my locker?" Henry nodded. "Sit down, Maya. We need to talk." She took a slow step forward but remained standing. "Why?" Henry exhaled, shaking his head. "I've been in this hospital for weeks, Maya. And in that time, I've seen everything." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "The way you're treated. The way Dr. Langston undermines you at every turn. The way your colleagues keep their distance, barely acknowledging your presence. Even the way the administrator dismissed you, as if your future here is a formality they can erase." Maya's hands clenched. He had seen it all, but that wasn't what scared her the most. It was the way he spoke, as if he was holding the winning hand in a game she didn't even know she was playing. "Henry, I appreciate your concern, but you don't get it," Henry interrupted. His voice was calm, certain. He leaned forward, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. "I'm not just a patient, Maya." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Then he continued. "My full name is Henry Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Healthcare." Maya's breath hitched. Caldwell Healthcare, one of the largest and most powerful hospital networks in the country, including Westhaven Medical Center. Her hospital. Her entire world tilted. Henry studied her reaction carefully. "You're not the first person this has happened to," he said. "But you might be the last." Maya's voice finally found its way back. I don't understand." Henry smirked. "You will." He gestured toward a sleek tablet resting on his bedside table. Maya's eyes widened when she saw the security footage playing on the screen. Footage of her, the operating room, Dr. Langston humiliating her, the administrator dismissing her, the hushed conversations of nurses whispering behind her back. Her pulse raced. Henry tapped the screen. "Everything that's happened? I recorded it all." Maya's head spun. "How?" she whispered. "I own this hospital, Maya," Henry said simply, "and I make it my business to know exactly what goes on inside it." Her breath was shaky. She had fought for years to be seen, to be taken seriously, to be valued. And now, this man, a patient she barely knew, held every piece of evidence she never had. "Why?" she finally asked. Henry chuckled. "Because I hate bad investments." He let that sink in before continuing. "This hospital has a reputation, a polished, clean, prestigious image, but underneath, it's rotting." Maya felt her chest tighten. "And Dr. Langston?" Henry shook his head. "A relic of a broken system that I have no interest in keeping around." Maya's legs felt weak. This was bigger than her, bigger than anything she had ever imagined. And then Henry leaned in, his voice dropping to something quieter, something dangerous. "It's time to shake things up, Maya." He studied her for a long moment before delivering the words that would change her life forever. "Let me show you how real power works." The air inside Westhaven Medical Center was different. A storm was brewing. Whispers spread through the hallways. Something was happening. Doctors huddled in small groups. Nurses glanced nervously at each other. And administrators moved with an urgency no one had seen before. Someone had called a full-scale hospital review, and that someone was Henry Caldwell. Maya Carter felt it the second she walked in. The weight of the tension, the way people looked at her, then quickly looked away. Something was wrong. "Did you hear?" a nurse whispered as she passed. "The board executives are here." "An investigation is happening," another said. Maya's stomach twisted. She turned a corner and stopped cold. Dr. Richard Langston stood at the nurse's station, gripping a file so tightly his knuckles turned white. For the first time since she had met him, he looked nervous. Maya watched as one of the hospital administrators approached him, speaking in a hushed but frantic voice. Langston's jaw tightened. His arrogance was cracking. "What's happening?" Maya thought. That's when she saw Henry Caldwell's business card still sitting in her bag. And it hit her. Henry did this. "Attention, all hospital staff," a voice came over the intercom. "There will be a mandatory meeting in the main auditorium in 10 minutes. All employees must attend." Maya's heartbeat pounded. This wasn't a normal meeting. She knew exactly what this was. It was Henry. Maya moved with the rest of the hospital staff toward the auditorium. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. The entire board of directors was present, sitting in the front row. Executives in expensive suits, lawyers, consultants, hospital leadership. Every person of power was there. And at the center of it all, standing calmly at the podium, was Henry Caldwell. Maya took a seat near the back, her hands gripping the chair. "This is it." Henry scanned the room, his blue eyes sharp. Then, he spoke. "This hospital," Henry began, his voice carrying through the massive auditorium, "was built on prestige, on the idea that excellence is its foundation." He paused. "But what I've seen in my time here tells a different story." The silence was suffocating. Henry's gaze swept the room. "I have witnessed a culture of exclusion, of bias, of discrimination." Maya saw some nurses shrink in their seats. Doctors exchanged nervous glances. Administrators shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Langston sat stone-faced, his fingers curled into fists. Henry continued. "This is not just about one or two individuals. This is about a systemic problem, one that has gone unchecked for too long." Maya felt her throat tighten. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. Henry's next word sent a shockwave through the room. "I have personally initiated a full-scale review of Westhaven Medical Center. Effective immediately, this hospital will undergo mandatory restructuring, investigations, and leadership evaluations." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dr. Langston's face drained of color. And then, Henry dropped the final bombshell. "There is one person," Henry said, "who has endured the worst of this toxic culture and still maintained grace, professionalism, and integrity." The room froze. Henry's eyes locked on Maya. Maya's stomach dropped. "It is my decision," Henry continued, "that this person take on a new role at Westhaven Medical Center." He smiled. "A role that will ensure this never happens again." Maya's pulse raced. Henry took a deep breath, then spoke the words that would change everything. "I am appointing Maya Carter as the new diversity and equity lead for Westhaven Medical Center." The entire room erupted. Shock, whispers, some applause, some outrage. Maya's hands shook. Dr. Langston shot to his feet. "This is insanity," he barked. "She's barely been here." Henry's sharp gaze cut to him. "Then, maybe, Dr. Langston," he said coldly, "you should ask yourself why, in all your years here, no one saw you fit for the job." The entire room went silent. Maya couldn't breathe. Henry looked back at her and gave a small, knowing nod. And in that moment, Maya Carter realized something. She wasn't just another nurse anymore. She had power, and everything was about to change. The walls of Westhaven Medical Center had never felt tighter. The weight of the scandal pressed down on every corner of the hospital. And Dr. Richard Langston? He was about to realize that his reign of unchecked power was over. Langston stood in the center of the auditorium, seething. "This is a disgrace," he barked, his voice shaking with fury. "I have served this hospital for 20 years. I will not be disrespected like this." But no one rushed to defend him, because they all knew. The evidence was undeniable. One of the board members, a stern-looking woman in a navy blue suit, stood up. "Dr. Langston," she said crisply, holding up a tablet, "are you aware that multiple nurses and staff members have come forward against you in the last 24 hours? Langston froze. Whispers spread like wildfire through the room. "I don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. The woman's lips curled into something almost like pity. "We have records, Dr. Langston." She tapped the screen, and suddenly, on the large projection screen behind her, the truth played out for everyone to see. The first clip played. Langston sneering at Maya during an emergency shift. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you should find another profession." Maya clenched her fists, remembering the sting of those words. The next clip, Langston smirking at a group of nurses. "Affirmative action hire. She won't last long." Gasps echoed through the auditorium. The next clip, Langston talking to another senior doctor. "She's a problem. A lawsuit waiting to happen." The crowd erupted. Maya's breath hitched. She had known. But now, everyone knew. Langston's face turned ghostly pale. His own words had destroyed him. The head of the hospital board, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses, stood slowly. "Dr. Langston," he said, his voice carrying across the auditorium, "effective immediately, you are suspended from your duties pending a full investigation." Langston stumbled back. You can't do this," he stammered. "I have tenure. This is not up for debate." The board member interrupted. Two hospital security officers stepped forward. Langston's mouth fell open. He had been the king of this hospital for years. Untouchable, unchallenged. But today, he was just a disgraced man being escorted out. As Langston was led away, the same nurses who had once mocked Maya now looked at her with fear, with respect. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Instead, she stood from her chair, calmly adjusting the lapels of her coat. Then she walked, straight down the center of the auditorium, past every single person who had doubted her. And right before she reached the doors, she paused. She turned back, meeting the eyes of the staff who had made her life hell. Then, finally, she spoke. "You thought I was beneath you," Maya said softly. The room was dead silent. A single breath could be heard. She lifted her chin, unshaken. "Now," she smiled, "you'll never forget my name." And with that, Maya Carter walked out of the auditorium, leaving Westhaven Medical Center changed forever. Westhaven Medical Center would never be the same again. Dr. Richard Langston was gone, and in his place, a new beginning. For the first time, real change was coming. And at the center of it all, Maya Carter. The morning after Langston's downfall, the hospital had a different energy. There was uncertainty, whispers of what would happen next. But there was also something else, something stronger, hope. That afternoon, Henry Caldwell called a final meeting. This time, Maya didn't sit in the back. She sat right beside him. As the board members and department heads filed into the room, Maya could feel their eyes on her. But for the first time, she wasn't nervous. She wasn't doubting herself. She wasn't wondering if she belonged. Because now, she knew she did. Henry Caldwell stood up, his presence commanding instant silence. "Westhaven Medical Center is at a crossroads," he began. "There are two ways forward. 1. We continue the way things have been." His sharp eyes scanned the room. No one dared to meet them. Or 2. We build something better. A slow murmur spread through the room. The hospital board had already made their choice. And so had he. Caldwell turned to Maya, and then, with a smile, he announced the words that no one had expected. Maya Carter's heart stopped. Caldwell gestured toward her. "Maya will be taking on a leadership role in our hospital's new Equity and Diversity Initiative. She'll be working alongside our senior staff to ensure this hospital becomes what it was meant to be." Gasps, shock, and then, applause. Not forced, not sarcastic, but real. Maya felt her chest tighten as she stood. She had spent so long fighting just to be seen. Now, she was leading the fight for others. She met Caldwell's gaze, the man who had seen her, the man who had given her the chance she deserved, and he simply nodded, as if to say, "You earned this." The meeting ended, but Maya's new beginning was just starting. As she walked out, through the same hospital that had once tried to break her, she held her head high. No whispers, no cold shoulders, no one looking through her like she was invisible. Because now, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Dr. Richard Langston's name was permanently tainted, his reputation destroyed. No hospital in the state would dare touch him. His downfall was now a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened to those who let arrogance and discrimination blind them. But for Maya, her name, it was just the beginning. As she reached the hospital doors, she paused, taking it all in. Everything she had fought through, everything she had survived. And then, Maya Carter smiled, because she knew one thing for certain. Westhaven Medical Center was hers now, and it would never go back to the way it was. Not as long as she was here, not as long as they remembered her name.